Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to be respectful of your time, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar, Mosquito Prevention and Protection, a community call to action against mosquitoes. My name is Anais Medina Diaz. I'm the Director of Communications here at the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. I'm joined this evening by Pablo Cabrera, Communications Specialist, and Ali Gaspar, Outreach Assistant. Before we get started, I want to go over some quick housekeeping items. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send it through the Q&A window that can be found on your Zoom bar, or sometimes that's at the very bottom of your window. Questions are welcomed throughout the presentation, so if something perks up and you want to ask away, go ahead and ask that. We'll address it throughout the presentation. We'll also have questions at the very end, so if you want to save your question there, you're welcome to do so. And lastly, we will be conducting the presentation in English and Spanish. We thank you for your patience in allowing us to summarize the slides in Spanish as we go along. Now, let's get started. I'll repeat that again in Spanish, and again, we'll try to be very quick about it. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos. Gracias por acompañarnos en el seminario web sobre prevención y protección contra mosquitos. Mi nombre es Anaís Medina Díaz, directora de comunicaciones del Distrito de Control de Mosquitos y Vectores del Valle de San Gabriel. Me acompañan hoy Pablo Cabrera y Ali Gaspar. Si tienen preguntas, envíenlas en la ventana de Q&A que se encuentra en la parte inferior de la pantalla. First, I want to take a moment to introduce our district, the San Gabriel Valley Mosquito and Vector Control District. We are a public health agency separate from the county, and we monitor and control for mosquito-borne diseases in the San Gabriel Valley. Our jurisdiction encompasses 26 cities, nearly 2 million residents, and over 700 square miles. Our services are free of additional charges because we are funded through your property taxes. Every parcel in our jurisdiction pays $20 a year for our services. Primero quiero tomar un momento para presentar nuestro distrito, el Distrito de Control de Mosquitos y Vectores del Valle de San Gabriel. Somos una agencia de salud pública separada del condado y monitoreamos y controlamos las enfermedades transmitidas por mosquitos en el Valle de San Gabriel. So now to address why mosquitoes have been in the news lately. Last month, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health announced the first detection of locally acquired dengue in a resident of Baldwin Park for 2024. This was the first detection of the year, but last year we actually saw the first detection in the state, and that was found in Pasadena. Since September 9th, the county has announced their investigation into 8 total human cases in 2024, 7 of them in the San Gabriel Valley. And to find more information about these cases, and they can only disclose very limited information, but you may visit publichealth.lacounty.gov. El mes pasado, el Departamento de Salud Pública del Condado de Los Ángeles anunció la primera detección de dengue adquirido localmente en un residente de Baldwin Park. Este año, la primera detección en el estado ocurrió en el año pasado, en 2023. Desde el 9 de septiembre, el condado ha anunciado su investigación sobre un total de 8 casos humanos en el 2024. 7 de ellos ocurrieron aquí en el Valle de San Gabriel. So what is dengue? How does this happen in a place where dengue is rare? And what exactly is dengue? Well, dengue viruses are spread through the bite of an infected Aedes mosquito. There are 4 different types, dengue 1, 2, 3, and 4, and meaning you can get dengue fever more than once. Symptoms are very similar to other viral infections and include a fever, plus body aches and pains, nausea, vomiting. It's very hard to distinguish amongst other different, very similar viruses. Only 1 in 4 will exhibit symptoms, and 1 in 20 will develop severe symptoms. There is a vaccine, but this is only recommended for children's ages 9 through 16 who have been infected with dengue previously and live in areas where dengue is common. ¿Cómo ocurre esto en un lugar donde el dengue no es raro? Bueno, dengue se transmite de la picadura de un mosquito Aedes infectado. Hay 4 diferentes tipos, dengue 1, 2, 3 y 4, lo que significa que puedes contraer dengue más de una vez. Los síntomas son muy similares a otras infecciones virales y incluyen fiebre, dolores y molestias, náuseas y vómitos. Hay una vacuna, pero es solo recomendada para niños de 9 a 16 años que han estado infectados con dengue y viven en áreas donde el dengue es común. So why is this happening now? Well, let's take a look around the world. Early this year, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued a health advisor to increase attention to dengue infections in the medical community. This stemmed from ongoing dengue outbreaks across the world. This plays an important part in why we're seeing dengue locally. If folks travel to any places currently experiencing a dengue outbreak or where dengue is common, there is a risk of getting sick. If they return home sick, there is now an introduction of the disease in our communities and the vector for this disease, which is the Aedes mosquito. Now, we will go into more detail about Aedes mosquitoes and bite prevention, what we look for when we're looking for Aedes mosquitoes. But first, we wanted to provide an update on how our district has responded. And you can get all this information if you're planning to travel outside of the country to any of these areas. You can visit the CDC website, has all of the upcoming or latest information about dengue outbreaks and any vaccines that you may need when traveling abroad. As a response to dengue, our district has been conducting door-to-door property inspections, backpack treatments, and outreach education, literature packets in multiple languages, enhanced surveillance to monitor mosquito populations and disease presence. Our primary goal in all of this is to reduce the presence of adult mosquitoes, mosquito sources, and increase education on how to prevent mosquitoes from breeding. Nuestro distrito ha estado realizando inspecciones de propiedades puerta a puerta, tratamientos con mochilas, educación comunitaria, distribución de paquetes informativos en varios idiomas y vigilancia intensificada para monitorear poblaciones, pero nuestro objetivo principal es a reducir la presencia de mosquitos adultos, fuentes de mosquitos y aumentar la educación. I want to take a pause right here, see if we have any questions. If not, again, invite you to ask any questions in the Q&A box that's found at the bottom of the screen, most likely. We can answer them publicly so that everyone might have the same question, can also have that response.
At this time, Anais, we do not have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. Okay, so really quickly, I kind of want to just cover what our district does. Like, what is vector control in your community? Well, a really quick way on how we monitor, control, and enhance about educate about mosquitoes. Our surveillance department gathers data that leads all of our operations. That means we're responding to what we collect out in the field. So we do that through mosquito trapping. We're able to monitor mosquito populations and disease presence. We send those collections for weekly testing, and we test for diseases like West Nile virus that we see every year. And then in this occurrence, we're also testing for Zika and dengue, chikungunya, all of those types of diseases. We also do dead bird collection. So if you find a dead bird in your community, it is a good surveillance method for West Nile virus, and you can report those dead birds to the state, which then notifies us for collection. Nuestro departamento de vigilancia recompila datos que guían todas nuestras operaciones a través de la captura de mosquitos. Podemos monitorear las poblaciones de mosquitos y la presencia de enfermedades como el virus del Nilo Occidental. Most of our operations revolve around controlling immature mosquitoes. This is primarily because it's much more effective to control mosquitoes in the water versus 1 or 3 flying adult mosquitoes. Our technicians monitor and control community sources, residential consultation, green swimming pools, underground storm drains, and black flies control along the foothill communities. La mayoría de nuestros esfuerzos operativos son a control mosquitos inmaduros porque es mucho más fácil a controlar cientos de mosquitos en el agua en lugar de 1 o 3 mosquitos adultos volando. Nuestros técnicos monitorean y controlan contenedores comunitarias, residenciales, piscinas verdes y también controlan las moscas negras en las comunidades cercanas a las montañas. Our public information strives to connect and educate with residents in different modalities, digital, in-person, and collaboratively with partners outside of our district. We provide presentations like this one or town halls and table at community events. So we're always happy to go to your community space where you may want to invite us. Nuestro equipo de información pública se esfuerza por conectar y educar a los residentes a través de diferentes modalidades, digital, presencial y de manera colaborativa. Oops. Okay, now for what you really want to know. Now onto how we can work together as a community to protect our health from mosquito-borne diseases. Ahora aprendemos cómo podemos trabajar juntos como una comunidad para proteger nuestra salud de las enfermedades transmitidas por los mosquitos. First, it's very important, and I know very simple, to understand the mosquito's life cycle because it helps us find the best way to control them. Mosquitoes go from an egg to an adult in only 5 to 7 days. Sometimes that can be shorter if the conditions are just right. Mosquitoes spend more than half their life in water, and so it's important to note that without standing water, we don't have mosquitoes. Another fun fact is only female mosquitoes bite, and that's because they need our blood to produce more eggs. So now that we know where mosquitoes grow and why they bite, we know how to prevent them. Es importante entender el ciclo de vida del mosquito porque nos ayuda a encontrar la mejor manera de controlarlos. Los mosquitos pasan de huevo a mosquito adulto en 5 a 7 días. Los mosquitos pasan más de la mitad de su vida en el agua. Sin agua estancada, no hay mosquitos. So what are we looking for when we're looking for immature mosquitoes? This is what we're looking for. They are sometimes confused as frog tadpoles, but they're not. They're very tiny. The longer ones, we call them little wigglers, and the shrimpy-looking ones, we call them tumblers. And essentially, they go through their life cycle in stagnant water in a very quick time. ¿Cómo sabes qué buscar en el agua estancada? Como ves aquí, estos mosquitos están dando vueltas en agua estancada en sus diferentes etapas de vida. So here in the San Gabriel Valley, we have 2 different species of mosquitoes. Our native mosquito, the Culex mosquito, can transmit diseases like West Nile virus. It's active at dusk and dawn and primarily prefers birds and large mammals. The district's control program has been very effective at controlling Culex mosquitoes and West Nile virus. That's why we often hear we didn't have mosquitoes before, but we have. We've had mosquitoes all along. But in 2011, the district identified the invasive Aedes mosquito had established itself in the cities of El Monte and South El Monte. Now, these mosquitoes were introduced at many points throughout the past few decades, but specifically in this instance, they were introduced through shipments of bamboo because of their egg-laying behavior. Invasive Aedes mosquitoes are daytime biters. They prefer human blood, and they bite frequently to take one blood meal and can transmit diseases like Zika, dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever. En el Valle de San Gabriel hay dos especies de mosquitos. El nativo Culex mosquito, que es activo al amanecer y anochecer, y puede transmitir el virus del Nilo Occidental y prefiere aves y mamíferos grandes. En el 2011 se identificaron mosquitos aedes invasores en el monte y sur del monte. Pican durante el día, prefieren sangre humana y pueden transmitir Zika, dengue, chikungunya y fiebre amarilla. Now, why are Aedes mosquitoes so incredibly difficult to control? Well, they're partly because of their egg-laying behavior. If you look at this picture, you might just notice a children's toy and little specks of dirt on it, but these are actually mosquito eggs. And so Aedes mosquitoes like to lay their eggs individually, and these eggs can be viable for years. We actually found this out in the field. If we were to submerge this into water, these eggs would start their life cycle. So, like I mentioned, while we may get rid of the standing water, if the eggs are already on the container and they get filled up with water again, then we have new mosquitoes. That's why it's really important to toss out unused containers that may have collected water in the past or modify them so they don't capture water anymore. Los mosquitos aedes son difíciles de controlar por su comportamiento de puesta de huevos. Ponen los huevos individualmente a lo largo de las líneas de agua y además los huevos pueden permanecer inactivos durante años y solo activarse al sumergirse en agua. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Aedes mosquitoes have not been actively transmitting diseases like dengue and Zika here in our region. However, it is common to see travel-related cases. Typically, the Department of Public Health reports these cases to our district, and we respond in a similar fashion as we described earlier. And every year we see a little bit more and more and more, especially the past couple of years. No es común que los mosquitos aedes transmiten activamente dengue y Zika en nuestra región, pero sí vemos casos de viajes. El Departamento de Salud Pública informa estos casos a nuestro distrito y respondemos. This year, we have seen a large rise in travel-related cases in our area and throughout the state, which increases the risk of an outbreak. As you can see here, this is actually data that's reported through the state of California, and it's only as of October 1st. We do expect to see this number climb much more into the 300s, even 400s by the end of the season. Sometimes the Department of Public Health throughout the state wait to report most of these cases. So this is in line with all the dengue activity that's going out throughout the world. Este año hemos visto un gran aumento de casos de viajes en nuestra área y el estado, lo que aumenta el riesgo de brote. Before we continue, again, I just want to remind folks to please share any questions that you may have. We'd be happy to answer them as we go along. And then for this next section, Pablo's going to take us through the best steps to take at home in your community to get rid of mosquitoes. I will continue providing the Spanish translation as we go along. Ali, just wanted to check in. Is there any questions?
Yes, we have a question about sunscreen and repellent. Can we wear sunscreen and repellent, and which one goes first?
That's a great question, and we'll go into repellents in a little bit. But yes, you can definitely wear both. We recommend that you apply the sunscreen first and then put on the repellent so that it's most effective. But with that, we'll continue on into the rest of our presentation. Go ahead, Pablo.
Thank you, Anais. So that brings us to what can you do? So what can you do about these annoying and dangerous mosquitoes? Fortunately, it's quite simple. First, it's extremely important to get rid of standing water. All it takes is a spoonful of water to grow hundreds of mosquitoes.
¿Qué hacer con los mosquitos? Es simple. Elimina el agua estancada. Con solo una cucharada puede crear cientos de mosquitos.
When we think of mosquito sources, we have to remember that these mosquitoes prefer small, cryptic sources. So think of a lot of items that tend to get forgotten, and something as small as a bottle cap can be enough for these mosquitoes to grow. They often prefer items with water lines and near shade where they can rest. It is very important to target them when they are in the water because once they become flying adults, it's very difficult to target them. Spraying for mosquitoes will not provide them long-term relief and will not stop them from coming back. Another thing to note is that Aedes mosquitoes don't travel very far. So if you're getting aggressively bit up by these mosquitoes, it's likely that the source is on your property or your neighbors, so we have to work together.
Los mosquitos prefieren contenedores pequeñas cerca de agua y sombra. Es crucial atacarlos en el agua ya que son difíciles de eliminar cuando son adultos. La fumigación no brinda alivio a largo plazo ni evita su regreso. Los mosquitos Aedes no viajan lejos. Si pican mucho, la fuente está en tu propiedad o en la de un vecino, así que hay que colaborar. I did see a question that came in through, and it's a great question. Allie, do you want to read it?
Of course. So someone had a great question. If you encounter the dried eggs in a container that had water and you touch them, are the dried eggs harmful to the skin?
Yes, so that's a great question. The eggs are not harmful to the skin. They are encapsulated essentially, and so once they get submerged is when they emerge out of there. But no, you can easily clean a container that you want to keep with like a green or a rough sponge or scrub, and then you can reuse the container. But if you're going to keep a container like that, or if you have containers in your home that you prefer to keep on your property, just go ahead and look for the water line, and that's how you can kind of identify where those mosquito eggs are. It'll be very difficult to tell mosquito eggs from dirt, so it's just best to scrub it out and make your life a little bit easier.
We also had a secondary question. The second question was, for large bodies of water like the Santa Fe Dam, how would you treat such areas? I ask because I visit there almost daily to walk my dogs and have noticed I've been getting bit up lately.
Yeah, another great question. So our district does all public sources that you can think of. That's in the water channels, places like the Santa Fe Dam. So what we do for those kinds of sources that are larger sources, that are community sources, and that most of the time we have those already in rotation, meaning that we check on them or we treat them between 3 to 4 weeks because that's how long our products take. If you are getting aggressively bit still out when you're walking, it depends where you are. Like if you're in a community, like in your neighborhood, and you might notice that a neighbor has a bunch of pots or little small containers like planters or what you see here on the picture, they may be stemming from that. We often hear, the water channel behind my house or the creek or these larger sources are contributing to me getting bit, but often we see Aedes mosquitoes come from much, much smaller sources like plant cuttings or even recyclable bins that have collected water. So we're really, really looking for much smaller sources because again, they need to lay those eggs on the side of something for them to, go through their life process.
Thank you, Anais. Another question. How can you encourage neighbors to participate in the Tip the Water campaign?
Great question. We actually have a whole slide dedicated to a program that we initiated a few years ago, a Bite Back Champion program. So we'll touch base on that in a second. But yes, we're here to help you encourage your residents around you so that you can get them to mobilize and get rid of these mosquitoes because it does take a community effort.
All right, and one last question. Are SGD mosquito treatments harmful to the community?
That's a really great question. And I just want to preface this with we are very transparent about the items that we use. You can visit our website. We often use larvicides and adulticides. So our larvicides, and most of the time, are based with BTI, which is a natural bacteria that only affects the mosquito and the mosquito larva. And most of the time, this is not harmful at all to any other animals like pets or even birds. And it has been certified to use on organic crops. Now, our adulticides, they are meant to kill mosquitoes only, and we apply very, very little. Like I'm talking a spoonful to a football, a football size field. But we treat at night to not impact any beneficial insects. That is because bees and butterflies are most likely asleep or not active at this time. The other thing is that at the rates that we're applying them, they are not harmful to folks. They don't leave any residue on or tarnish any finishes on cars or anything like that. You don't have to turn off your AC. They're very safe at the application rates that we are applying to them. Of course, we wear PPE because that's required by law, but essentially it is very safe to use at the rates that we use them, at the frequency that we use them. We don't use adult pesticides freely. We really reserve them when there is a public health emergency, like we've been seeing this year with the dengue activity.
All right,
And just want to mention, okay. You can also stay up to date on all of our area-wide pesticides on our website. It's very front. We're, again, very transparent about what we use, and we want folks to know what we're using in their communities. All right, so I think that concludes for our questions right now. Of course, as we go along, please feel free to drop the questions. This is the best way to share this information with you folks. So, Pablo, please take it away.
Great, thank you. And lots of really good questions. We really like to hear that. So moving on to mosquito solutions and resources that we have available on our website. Our district has developed a helpful checklist of items that you may not think of when looking for mosquito sources. We tend to think of the green pools, the bucket that's sitting outside your yard, but the webpage that we've developed really helps you kind of break it down and look at the smaller cryptic sources like we mentioned before. So take a look by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now, and you can always find this information on our website. And if you have these, to see if you have any of these sources in your yard, make sure to remove them or monitor them at least once a week. And the simple thing is that we like to emphasize is to remember no standing water equals no mosquitoes.
Nuestro distrito tiene una lista de fuentes comunes y críticos de mosquitos. Escanee el código QR. Si tiene estas fuentes, elimínelas o vigilen cada 5 a 7 días. Sin agua estancada no hay mosquitos.
The district also provides gambusia, or also known as mosquito fish, as biological control for mosquitoes. The fish are usually placed in closed sources like ponds or water features, and residents can request these free of charge by submitting a request on our website or by calling our district.
El distrito proporciona gombusia o mosquito fish para controlar mosquitos. Los peces se colocan en estanques o fuentes. Los residentes pueden solicitarlos en línea o por teléfono.
And this is our Bite Back program that was mentioned earlier in one of the questions. As a district, we offer our Bite Back Champions program really for residents who want to take that extra step and that initiative to mobilize their community. In this program, we provide the resources and materials for residents who want to be active and get rid of mosquitoes in their community. As community leaders, you're more likely to get your neighbors to take action against mosquitoes.
El distrito ofrece el programa Bite Back Champions, que brinda recursos para residentes que quieren controlar los mosquitos en sus comunidades. Como líderes pueden motivar a sus vecinos a actuar. Right before I just want to add, because this was the question, what we provide here is different kits. One of the kits has a bunch of door hangers that you can drop at your neighbors without having to interact them. So it's as easy as leaving a door hanger, and it provides just basic information about our campaigns like Tip, Toss, and Protect. Okay.
Sorry, before we continue, we do have a question. Is there any consumer product that one could use to get rid of mosquitoes, like in a garage, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the thing about garages is that we often like open them right to have free flow going in and out. So it makes it very difficult. I actually have this problem at my own home. We leave the door open in the garage and all the mosquitoes just want to hang out in there. One, because it's a lot cooler than being outside in the hot heat and sun. And sometimes they'll find really like neat places to hide in the shade. So it's very difficult to get rid of mosquitoes unless you are properly screening or not opening your door. So some folks don't open up their main garage door. They just have like a side door. And for those, we can recommend sort of like those screens that you can find like on online or in stores where you can, it's like a mesh screen. So that'll help keep mosquitoes out. The other thing that I would recommend if you're like, let's say working out or working on your car or something like that in your garage is that these 80 mosquitoes are actually terrible flyers. So if you have sort of like a fan propelling in your direction in multiple directions, that'll kind of help provide some kind of, I don't want to say a net, but it'll prevent them from kind of flying towards you. So those are some ways to kind of do that. But this next section actually talks about repelling, which is probably the best way to get them to stop biting you. But those are some ways that you can keep them out of repelling of the garage. Unfortunately, like adulticides, like over-the-counter pesticides, we don't recommend, especially indoors, because you don't have any way to air out that space. But also just repeated use of pesticides only contributes to making them more, what is the word? The pesticides don't become very effective at killing them after continuous use. So those are all different ways that you can kind of prevent or eliminate them from those areas. But of course, this next section talks about repellents, which is probably the most effective way to prevent bites. Pablo?
Correct. And yeah, this is probably the information we really hope people get, especially when it comes to mosquito repellent. Like we mentioned, another important item against mosquitoes is using repellent that is safe and effective and that it works. We often hear people say that repellent doesn't work because they're still getting bit. But with so many products in the stores, it can be confusing on which one to get. So it's incredibly important to pick the right one. Your repellent can come in many different forms, like a spray, a lotion, or in a wipe form. But the most important thing is to make sure that you're using repellent that has one of these 4 active ingredients. Make sure it has oil of lemon eucalyptus, DEET, picaridin, or IR 3535. And like I mentioned, as long as your repellent has one of these 4 active ingredients, you're going to be using something that's safe and effective. And you can typically find that information on the label of your repellent near the bottom.
Otro elemento importante contra los mosquitos es usar el repelente eficaz. Es crucial elegir el adecuado entre tantos productos. Recomendamos un repelente en aerosol o loción con uno de estos ingredientes activos: aceite de eucalipto de limón, picaridina o IR 3535. Esta información suele estar en la parte inferior de la botella.
And when it comes to your mosquito repellent, the percentage does matter as well. The percentage is a good indicator of how long the repellent will work. We recommend a higher percentage for longer outdoor use. DEET and picaridin tend to be most effective against Aedes mosquitoes. And we also recommend, like anything, to use the label, to follow the label and reapply as needed.
El porcentaje es clave, indica la duración del repelente. Se sugiere un porcentaje más alto para estar más tiempo al aire libre. El D y la picaridina ofrecen buena eficacia contra los mosquitos aedes. Y tiene que usar el repelente, como dice en la botella.
Now, hopefully we don't break some hearts here, but when it comes to some other mosquito repellent items out there, like the wearable bracelets and stickers, well, unfortunately, they don't quite work. These types of gadgets are good at protecting just that specific area. So the only area that the sticker is covering or where you have that bracelet on your wrist. Additionally, Aedes mosquitoes tend to aim for the lower extremities of our bodies, when the ankles, and these gadgets are typically used around our wrists and not around our ankles.
Los repelentes portátiles como pulseras o calcomanías no funcionan bien. Protegen solo el área cercana y no han sido estudiados formalmente. Los mosquitos aedes atacan más las extremidades inferiores, mientras que estos dispositivos se usan en la parte superior.
And there are other gadgets that we've seen as well and products on store shelves promising a relief from mosquitoes or creating this invisible force field around you to protect you from mosquitoes. But these solutions are not reliable. The products you see on the screen, again, only provide protection or repel mosquitoes around that direct area of the item, like the candles, plants, and the coils you've seen. Bug zappers are also extremely popular items that we've seen, but they're actually killing off more beneficial insects and not mosquitoes themselves.
Muchos productos en tiendas prometen alivio para picaduras de mosquitos, pero no son confiables. Solo protegen o repelen a los mosquitos cerca del producto, como velas o plantas. Los matamoscas son populares también, pero suelen matar insectos beneficiosos, no mosquitos.
And the other item that we want to focus too on is your environment. Plants seem to be a popular topic regarding mosquitoes. Although we don't recommend any plants that quote unquote repel mosquitoes, there are some factors to keep in mind with the vegetation on your property. Mosquitoes use plants as shades to shield themselves from the intense heat during the day. Mosquitoes will take advantage of the humidity created by lush vegetation, such as tropical plants and plants that provide a lot of coverage, such as ivy. Mosquitoes will rest under the leaves of these plants until it gets cool enough for them to fly and seek a blood meal. If your property contains dense vegetation, we recommend trimming the vegetation so that there's more airflow through and underneath the plant, preventing the mosquitoes from a comfortable resting area.
Las plantas tienden a ser un tema popular con respecto a los mosquitos. Aunque no recomendamos ninguna planta para repeler mosquitos, hay algunos factores a tener en cuenta con la vegetación en tu propiedad. Los mosquitos usan las plantas como sombra para protegerse del calor intenso. Aprovechan la humedad creada por la vegetación exuberante, como las plantas tropicales y las plantas que brindan mucha cobertura, como la hiedra. Los mosquitos descansaron bajo las hojas de estas plantas hasta que se enfríen lo suficiente para volar y buscar alimento.
And on to California native plant. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm talking about bromeliads. Onto a common plant that we typically see in a lot of residential homes. And people love to have these specific plants inside and outside their homes are bromeliads. Like many tropical plants, bromeliads hold water on the inside of their leaves. That's just what they naturally do, creating the perfect place, you guessed it, for mosquitoes to grow. We recommend residents to get rid of these bromeliads because they're a common source that our technicians will always find mosquito larvae in. However, if you plan to keep these plants, you'll have to dump out the water weekly to prevent the mosquitoes from growing in them.
Una planta común que a muchas personas les gusta colocar dentro y fuera de la casa es la bromelia. Sin embargo, como muchas plantas tropicales, las bromelias retienen agua en el interior de sus hojas, creando un lugar perfecto que crezcan los mosquitos. Recomendamos a los residentes desecharse de las bromelias porque son una fuente común de mosquitos. Sin embargo, si planeas conservar la planta, tendrás que vaciar el agua semanalmente para evitar los mosquitos que crezcan.
Another element that we like to focus on are California native plants. One of the most sustainable ways to prevent mosquitoes is planting California native plants. Besides the fact that they're beautiful when they're blooming and support native animals in our area, native plants are much drier plants and eliminate that humid, dense vegetation that tropical plants tend to create and that mosquitoes love. These plants do not repel mosquitoes. Rather, they create the inhospitable environment that mosquitoes do not like, which will force mosquitoes to move on somewhere else and not rest in or around your property.
Una de las formas más sostenibles de prevenir los mosquitos es plantear plantas nativas de California, además de ser hermosas cuando florecen y de apoyar a los animales nativos. Las plantas nativas son mucho más secas, eliminando los ambientes húmedos que los mosquitos necesitan.
And for more information on California native plants, you can visit our website or by scanning the QR code on your screen to get more information on these resources.
Para más información sobre plantas nativas, pueden visitar nuestro sitio de web escaneando el código QR.
So to conclude, mosquito prevention and protection is very simple, and no product or gadget is going to be the one-all end-all to provide long-term relief. Mosquito control is a shared responsibility, and we need your help and the help of your neighbors to reduce these mosquitoes in your community. Simply remember, tip, toss, protect. Tip out stagnant water, toss unused containers because they may have the eggs on them, and protect yourself using mosquito repellent that works. We also have our Bite Back Champions program. Excuse me. We also have our Bite Back Champions program that you can join, and we provide you with all the materials and resources to hand out in your community. Lastly, we're here to help as your mosquito and vector control district. Our services are free of charge, so you don't. So if you've done everything that we've explained here in our webinar and that we've outlined and still can't seem to find the relief that you're looking for, you can always submit a tip on our website, and we may provide a property consultation to your home or your neighborhood.
Para concluir, la prevención y protección contra mosquitos es sencilla y ningún producto ofrecerá alivio a largo plazo. El control es responsabilidad de todos y necesitamos su ayuda y la de sus vecinos. Recuerde tirar el agua estancada, deseche recipientes y protéjase con repelente. Si ya ha hecho todo y no tiene alivio, envía un aviso para una consulta gratuita. And
Lastly,
then, oh, go ahead. Go
yeah.
ahead, sorry.
Lastly, before we open up for additional questions here at the end, we do invite you to please take our quick survey here at the end to let us know how we did and more information from our web.
Antes de abrir la sesión a preguntas, responda a esta breve encuesta de preguntas sobre cómo nos fue y cómo podemos mejorar. And then again, please, just a friendly reminder, please answer your questions. We are here to ask your questions. We're here to answer them. I know there's a lot of things that you may be thinking of that we might have not covered. It also helps us know what information is not out there that you may need. So please submit your questions. We'll answer them openly in this forum. So we'll give you a few seconds more. I know we have one question, so we can move on to that one. Ellie, you want to read it out?
Sure. Once a mosquito enters your home, for example, are they likely to enter a pet's drinking water bowl, a glass of water sitting on the counter, or even toilet water with an open toilet seat?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, even inside your home, we have resting sources of water. So maybe the glass of drinking water is not one because we wash the glass pretty often, we use it pretty often. The same thing with the water bowl. As long as you're changing that water every 5 to 7 days, and if your dogs are anything like mine, they definitely drink all their water every day. But the toilet bowl can become a source. If you have let's say like a restroom that you don't often use, and it just kind of sits there, it creates that water line. And so that water line then becomes a target for mosquitoes to lay their eggs because of the calcium that gets left behind. So sources like that you may not frequently see, so a unused toilet bowl, or even kind of like the toilet brush holder, like water gets stuck in there, or those fake very well used Keurigs containers at the very bottom. If water ends up accumulating there, that can also become a source. I often see plant cuttings inside as well, and the water starts to turn brown. That definitely becomes a source, or even any plants that are placed in rocks and water, and if the water is above the rock line, then also becomes a source. So these smaller sources that you have inside, especially if you love having plants inside, just remember to not overwater the plants so that you don't have standing water remaining for a long time.
We have another question. If I'm traveling, do you recommend that I buy repellent when I get to my destination, or am I allowed to take some with me, especially since getting through TSA can be tricky?
Yeah, so definitely I would encourage you to buy your repellent here. In fact, because of dengue this year, repellent has actually run out in some countries. Like very early on, before the mosquito season even started here, there was news stories of repellent running out in Argentina, in Peru, in places where there's dengue outbreaks around the world. So, and we also don't know what kind of products they have in different countries. So I would definitely encourage you to purchase a repellent here. You can definitely find a repellent size, travel size bottle online or in the store. Online is probably easiest, but you could definitely carry on, or I'm sorry, check in your repellent bottle in your check-in luggage, especially if you're going overseas. You're most likely going to take a larger luggage size, then you could put it in there. But yes, definitely encourage you to buy your repellent here in the States before going abroad to a different country.
And really quick, Anais, to add to that, to traveling, like we mentioned, mosquito repellent does come in different forms. So there's little mosquito wipes. They're essentially little wet wipes, and those are really awesome to travel with because you can take as many as you want in your carry-on with no issue with the liquid restriction.
Great catch.
Thank you, guys. We have one more question. Is it okay if I let you guys know about a mosquito source on my neighbor's property?
Yes, absolutely. We often get folks who want to report their neighbor's swimming pool, and that is totally okay. If you are not the person reporting a source on your own property, your information won't be disclosed to the person that you're reporting. Additionally, we don't want to get anyone in trouble. We are solely focused on mosquitoes. We want to get into someone's property, treat the mosquito issue. So like, let's say it was a green pool. We will work with the resident to ensure that that pool is not breeding, so as long as they're moving towards either repairing it or emptying it. So we're definitely in the business of trying to help folks. We're not trying to create more obstacles or find them or anything like that. We really want to get rid of the mosquitoes and to the root cause. So it's an excellent question. We are here to help. You can either report your neighbors, or let's say that you have a community space that you go to that you always get bit up. You know, we can, as long as they're within our jurisdiction, we can definitely go out there. But other vector control districts around the county have very similar services and are, I'm sure, very willing and able to help in that situation. All right, any
And
more?
sorry,
Go
one
ahead.
more question. Why is it that my husband gets bit all the time, but not me? Is it because of our blood type?
Yes, I love this question. There are many things that go into why a mosquito decides to bite you or the person next to you. And yes, blood type is one reason, but it's not the entire reason. It also comes down to body heat, body smell, hormones, sweat, and then of course blood type. So there's all these different things that really go into why a mosquito is going to choose one person over the other. And it's all a variety of things. So, but yes, there have been studies that mention that folks who have a certain blood type over another are more likely to get bit, but it's not the only thing that encourages mosquitoes to bite you over another person.
Thank you. Another question came through. When does the mosquito season start and end, or does it run all year round?
Yeah, so because we're in Southern California, we actually have mosquito season all year long. But disease activity is specifically temperature related. So we often see disease activity and mosquito activity really start to kick up in April, and then typically it would go until maybe the early October, mid-October. But as our temperature and climate changes, we are seeing mosquito season go longer and longer. For example, this year, we would have already been kind of winding down on the season, and we're still very much full force, if not at top level, because of these dengue cases. And so with the introduction of Aedes mosquitoes in our region, we kind of extended our season. So we first see our Culex season start in April, like I mentioned, and West Nile virus activity around June, July, and then August, September, October, and now the beginning of November, we're seeing Aedes mosquitoes with their activity. Another thing to note is last year we had Hurricane Hillary, and along with that became a lot of Aedes production right after that. So when we have these introductions of like rain events later on in the season, it also contributes to mosquito activity. So, and then in the winter, while you don't see mosquitoes as often, that's because they're kind of hiding in warmer spaces. So here in our area, we see them populate or go into quote unquote hibernation. It's not exactly called that, but they go into hibernation or they hang around in our underground storm drains where it's a lot warmer for them. Great question.
Another question from someone who works for Pasadena Unified School District. Are there any teaching resources for young children, particularly the pre-K level? I can actually take this one since I run a preschool program. Yes, we do have resources for all students from K through 12. You can actually go onto our website and I'll drop the link in the chat, but it's vectoreducation.org. And we have resources for teachers on how to keep mosquitoes out of the classroom, but also programs that are free to everyone within San Gabriel Valley. The preschool program, of course, I'm biased, is absolutely amazing. We take kindergarten state standards and we sort of cater the program around that. So we teach them everything they need to know in the hopes that they also get booked for our kindergarten programs. So all you have to do is pretty much just book an appointment and I will come out to you or one of our amazing education specialists will come out to share these resources and make sure that teachers and students all over San Gabriel Valley have access to the same wonderful education.
Thanks, Ali. And Ali is not biased. It is a very great program. Our K through 12 program is really great. Throughout, we've been recognized throughout the state for how engaging it is, and it really does take a community science approach to it as well.
And we have another question. Are pets vulnerable to mosquito bites and can they get infected with Zika or West Nile?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I did actually not cover this. So thank you so much for asking. Pets are vulnerable to Aedes mosquitoes because Aedes mosquitoes can transmit heartworm. And so that's how they can get heartworm. It's mostly the Aedes albopictus, which is one of the species that we have here. And the best way to prevent heartworm is obviously through medication. We recommend you, and veterinarians are always promoting to prevent heartworm because that's the best way of protection is through prevention. But yes, Aedes mosquitoes can transmit heartworm. but they cannot transmit Zika, or we have not seen studies of Zika, and we haven't seen yet West Nile virus either. It's mostly heartworm.
Okay, and another question. Is there anything we can do during the winter to prevent mosquitoes coming onto our property in the springtime?
Yeah, so right before spring, or spring is a really great time to kind of go throughout your entire yard, especially as you're the green, you have the green thumb, you're planting new vegetation. Going back to sort of our native California plants is encouraging sort of more of those plants to grow on your properties, because you are, one, encouraging beneficial insects like bees and butterflies to be in your spaces. You're eliminating some of this more dense vegetation. I think often we also look at our homes, or if you have a property that has like ripped window screens, it's a time to, modify those or prevent, close those screens up. Or if you have rain gutters, if those rain gutters get kind of clogged up with debris, it's a really good time to make sure you clean those out so that the water can freely flow. Also, rain barrels are huge, and we want you to conserve water, but we also want you to make sure that you're screening those rain barrels properly, because that can be an absolute disaster if it starts to breed mosquitoes, or use that water as much as possible. And a lot of folks also like to capture water with just buckets. Again, clean those buckets out as soon as possible. So it's just looking at all these little sources that you may see in the off season, or quote unquote off season, and either storing them away, modifying them by drilling holes, or cleaning them out of your yard, or any to kind of debris that may clog them. You'll see in our checklist, and we'll share all the links with a follow-up email, where sometimes you see yard drains or yard gutters that can be screened to kind of prevent debris from accumulating in there and not letting the water go through. So those are all opportunities for you to kind of make these small minor modifications around your property in the spring or early spring, winter time.
All right, and I don't see any more questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really enjoyed having you in this webinar. All these questions were excellent. It really helps us inform you and answer your questions and share this information on our social media and also our public spaces. So thank you. Please feel free to reach out if any of our programs interest you, or if you want to have a similar presentation to your own groups, whether it's work or HOAs or school district. We are willing and able to do those presentations, and more than happy to do so. So with that, thank you so much for joining us. We'll send out a follow-up email with all these links and more resources for you to access. So thank you.